Okay, so imagine this. You're standing in a place where the air is just. It's white with alkaline dust. The wind's howling, and you can barely see your hand in front of your face.
Right.
But then the wind dies down, and a shape starts to emerge from the haze. It's not a tent, not a normal building.
No.
It's this 3-story wooden temple, intricately carved. And the people who built it know that in a few days, they're going to burn it to the ground.
And right past that temple, you might see a fire-breathing metal octopus on wheels.
Or a Spanish galleon,
Yeah.
sailing through the desert.
Exactly.
Now, if you describe that scene to most people, they nod and they go, oh, right, Burning Man.
The rave in the desert.
The rave in the desert. Hippies, drugs, tech bros. And, that's the shorthand. That's the headline version.
It is.
But today, we are doing a deep dive into a column that argues that definition isn't just incomplete. It's missing the entire point.
Completely. I mean, if you stop at Rave in the Desert, you miss the entire mechanism. The source material we're looking at today traces the event's history from 1986 all the way to its theme for 2025.
Wow.
And its core argument is that Burning Man isn't really a festival, it's a temporary city.
Black Rock City.
Black Rock City. It's a massive recurring experiment in future urbanism, social engineering, and just human survival.
And that distinction, that's where we have to start. Because calling it a party just ignores the logistics of it all.
The sheer scale of it.
We are talking about building a fully functional metropolis with a population density like Manhattan in a place that is actively trying to kill you.
Right.
And then a week later, erasing it so that not a single sequin is left.
And that's really the mission of this deep dive. We're not just looking at the party, we're looking at the prototype.
Right.
We want to understand how a bonfire on a beach evolved into this global cultural force that influences, everything from Silicon Valley to urban planning.
So the source is saying if you want to understand where society might be headed,
or at least where some people want it to head,
you have to look at the timeline of Burning Man.
You do.
Okay, so let's look at that timeline. But to understand the city, we have to go back way before the big infrastructure.
Way back.
I have to go to 1986, Baker Beach, San Francisco.
The humble beginning. It was just two guys, Larry Harvey and Jerry James.
And it wasn't a movement yet, right? It was just this spontaneous act.
Totally. They dragged a wooden figure, the very first man, down to the water, and they burned it. It was intimate. It was just friends.
But the source makes a really interesting point here about the venue itself.
It does.
It says the act of burning the man, that was the seed. But the environment, the beach, was actually holding it back.
Right. It was too accessible, too close to civilization.
You could walk away.
Yeah. If you get cold, you go buy a coffee. The stakes are just really low.
Which brings us to the first major turning point. The pivot that changed everything. 1990.
The year of the ban.
Exactly. So for 4 years, this thing is growing. The crowds on the beach get bigger. And eventually the police step in and say, absolutely not. No more fires. You cannot burn this here.
Which, in the moment, probably felt like a total disaster for them. The end of the whole thing.
Of course.
But historically, it was the most important thing that could have happened.
Why is that?
Because they couldn't stay in San Francisco.
Yeah.
They had to find a place where nobody would tell them no.
A place with no neighbors.
Exactly.
So they chose the Black Rock Desert in Nevada. And I think it's hard to overstate how different that is from a beach in San Francisco.
Oh, it's night and day. This isn't sand dunes. It's a vast, flat, prehistoric lake bed. A playa. It's hard, alkaline ground. It's blindingly bright during the day, freezing at night, and there's nothing alive out there.
So the source argues that by moving there, they shifted the entire genre of the event.
Completely. On a beach, you're an attendee, you watch a fire, you go home to your warm bed.
Right.
In the Black Rock Desert, you are a survivor.
You become a citizen by necessity. You can't just show up for an hour. You have to bring your own water, shelter, food for a whole week.
And that hostility, it forces cooperation. You need your neighbors.
You have to build a city.
Exactly. It forces city building. You can't exist there alone. And that's what created this immersive environment the source talks about. It stopped being a show, and it started being about building a community from scratch.
The desert was a blank canvas.
A blank canvas where they could just rewrite the rules.
And any community, any city, needs rules. Or in this case, principles.
Right, because if you just put 70,000 people in a lawless desert, you don't get a utopia.
You get Lord of the Flies.
You get Lord of the Flies, and this is crucial. If you've ever wondered why Burning Man feels so different from, say, a Coachella, it's because of the structural code that runs the city.
And the source points out that these weren't written down right away.
No, it took until 2004 for Larry Harvey to actually codify the 10 principles.
So they were forming organically before that.
Right. They were descriptive before they were prescriptive. They just looked at what was working and said, okay, let's write this down so we don't lose it.
So let's unpack the big ones from the text, because they're often misunderstood. First up, radical inclusion.
Which sounds simple, right? Everyone is welcome. But in practice, it's really hard.
It means literally anyone.
Anyone. No VIP velvet ropes, at least in theory. It's about removing the barriers to entry that you find in normal society. You don't have to be cool or rich or in the know.
You just have to show up and survive.
You just have to show up.
Okay, then there's gifting. This is the one that I think confuses people the most.
Yeah.
A lot of outsiders think it's like a barter system. I'll trade you this bracelet for a sandwich.
No, and the source is very specific about this. It is not barter.
Barter is still a transaction.
It's still a transaction. If I do X, I get Y. That's just business. Gifting is an economy based on giving with zero expectation of a return.
It breaks the whole transactional thing.
Completely.
So if I'm walking around Black Rock City and I'm thirsty, someone might just hand me a drink. Not because they want money or a trade.
Just because you need it. And when you accept that gift, it changes the dynamic. It creates this web of gratitude, social capital, not financial capital.
Which leads right into decommodification.
The rejection of the market. No logos, no sponsorships, no cash allowed on site, except for, ice and coffee.
And the source says, this is about preserving the spirit of the thing.
It is. If you're walking around and you see a Bud Light stage, you're immediately snapped back into your role as a consumer.
Right.
You remove the brands, you're forced to just be a person again.
Finally, leave no trace.
The environmental imperative. Because the desert is so pristine, any piece of trash. A sequin, a cigarette butt, it's visible.
So the goal is to leave it exactly as you found it.
A level of civic responsibility you just don't see in permanent cities.
And the source notes that these principles, they made the culture portable. People could take them and start regional burns all over the world.
Yeah, it turned a location into a philosophy. You can have a burn in South Africa now. It became like open source software for community building.
Speaking of software, we have to talk about Silicon Valley.
Ah, yes.
The source draws a very thick line between the dusty playa and the pristine campuses of big tech.
It was a relationship that goes way back, and it's deeper than just tech bros like to party. The source actually cites Stanford research calling Burning Man the cultural soil for new media industries.
There's a specific anecdote in here that I hadn't realized was connected. The Google Doodle.
Yes, the very first one.
So back in 1998, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they wanted to let users know that if the servers crashed, no one was in the office.
Right.
Why? Because they'd all gone to Burning Man.
So they put the little stick figure man behind the second O in Google. It's a perfect example.
But it's more than just a logo.
Oh, yeah. The insight in the text is that Burning Man acts as cultural infrastructure for the tech world. I mean, think about it. What is Burning Man? It's rapid prototyping.
You build something.
You test it in a harsh environment, you iterate, and then you tear it down. That is the agile methodology of Silicon Valley, just applied to living.
It's a sandbox. If you're an engineer working on, the future of AI, where else can you go to see these radical experiments in community governance or large-scale engineering that doesn't have to pass a building code?
Exactly. It strips away the boardroom pretense. You're not pitching a VC. You're building an art car with them. And the source suggests that this collaborative survival is why so much of the early web ethos mirrors the 10 principles.
Open access, community-driven.
Non-commercial. They grew out of the same soil.
And that experimental spirit is most visible in the art itself. The source describes these massive mutant vehicles.
Art cars, yeah.
Dragons, pirate ships, and these huge fire sculptures. But I was surprised to learn the art isn't just random. It's guided by these annual themes.
Since 1996. And the themes are fascinating. They're like a mirror for what the community and, by extension, society is worried about at the time.
Or prompts for the artists.
Yeah. Okay, so let's walk through the highlight reel from the source. It really shows the evolution. Mid-90s, 1995, the theme was Inferno.
Inferno. This is when the event becomes mythic. The source says this was the shift from a festival to a burning ritual.
Spiritual rebirth.
Primal, catharsis. It wasn't about peace and love. It was about fire.
And then immediately after that, 1996, the theme is decommodification.
Which tells you, even back then, they were worried about selling out. They needed to plant a flag that said, this is about the experience, not the stuff.
Then a shift in the late 90s toward nature. 1997 was fertility.
Right, regeneration. But the big pivot, the one that I think really matured the whole thing, was in 2000.
The theme was the body. Why was that so significant?
Because that's when the temple became a permanent fixture. Before 2000, it was all about the man, loud, fire, chaos. The temple introduced a space for grief, for silence, for letting go.
The source says it gave the city its soul.
I think so. You could party all night, but then you could go to the temple and cry over a lost loved one.
And then burn it.
And then burn it in total silence. It added this full spectrum of human emotion.
Then into the mid-2000s, the themes get more intellectual. 2004 was the Vault of Heaven.
Very sci-fi. This was a convergence of science and art. You saw NASA engineers, MIT Media Lab folks getting involved.
Solidifying that tech link.
Right. They were looking at the stars, asking big questions.
But then in 2007, things get a bit complicated. The theme was the Green Man.
The irony here.
So the theme is about nature and the environment, but the source explicitly mentions this piece called Crude Awakening.
A massive 90-foot sculpture of an oil derrick.
And at the end of the event,
They burned it. And not just with wood. They used jet fuel and propane to create a literal mushroom cloud that just stunned the crowd.
so a theme about being green, and you detonate a massive explosion of fossil fuels.
It sparked a huge debate, which the source notes was probably intentional. It forced the community to confront its own hypocrisy. You can't talk about saving the planet while burning thousands of gallons of propane for fun.
Skipping ahead to 2013, we had Cargo Cult.
I love this one. A cargo cult is when indigenous societies would build like wooden replicas of airplanes, hoping to attract the cargo brought by Westerners.
So the theme was a critique of us.
It was looking in the mirror. It was asking, are we just worshiping stuff, building these structures, hoping for salvation? A critique of consumerism. It showed the event was capable of self-satire.
And then the year the world stopped, 2020, the multiverse.
The year that wasn't, COVID forced the burn into the digital realm, a weird but necessary evolution.
And finally, bringing us to now. The source mentions the 2025 theme, Tularo Today.
Full circle, back to the prototype idea. The focus is now on social design. Not just surviving, but actively asking, how do we want to live?
But, and this is a very large but that we have to address. Even with these themes, the source points out this massive elephant in the room.
Or maybe a private jet in the room.
Right. The paradox of principles. We're talking about the rise of celebrity culture at the burn. The source lists, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos.
And this is the friction point. The source creates a really interesting tension here.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have radical inclusion. You can't ban billionaires. If everyone's welcome, everyone is welcome.
But does their presence break the other principles?
That's the debate. If you come to the desert, but you stay in a turnkey camp where hired staff cook your meals and set up your air-conditioned tent.
And you fly in on a helicopter.
Right. Are you really a citizen of Black Rock City? Or are you a tourist?
It creates a class system in a place designed to eliminate class.
Exactly. The source notes that this commodification of the experience, people paying $50,000 for a luxury safari, it threatens the core ethos. It turns gifting into service.
And it alienates the people who actually build the city for free.
Of course. And it ties back to that sustainability issue. The source asks a really hard question. Who is the burn for?
Is it a playground for the wealthy, or is it still a survivalist experiment?
It's an existential crisis. And the source doesn't give a clean answer. It suggests this conflict is the experiment. Can a society maintain its ideals when faced with extreme wealth? Black Rock City is facing the same problems as San Francisco or New York.
And despite all these tensions, the source concludes that the value of Burning Man endures.
It does. The synthesis here is that it's evolved from a bonfire into this global hub of creativity.
A place to test drive the future.
And even if the experiment fails in some areas, like with equity, the data from that failure is still valuable.
And the impact doesn't just stay in Nevada.
No, that's the modern significance. When those 70,000 people go home, they take that attitude with them. They start community gardens, they run their companies differently.
A temporary city leaves a permanent mark.
The burn is just the spark. The fire happens in the real world.
So we've gone from a beach bonfire in 1986 to a global movement grappling with its own carbon footprint and the billionaires in its backyard. It's been a wild evolution.
It really has. It's a microcosm of the last 40 years.
As we wrap this deep dive up, I want to leave the listener with a final thought based on where the source sees this all going. Looking at that transition from 2024's The Great Unknown to 2025's Tomorrow Today.
I think the question is this. If we accept the premise that Burning Man is a mirror for our society, a prototype, what does its current state tell us about where we are heading?
That's a heavy question.
It is. Are we moving toward that cooperative Tomorrow Today vision where we solve problems with radical creativity and gifting?
No.
Or, looking at the influencers and the spectacle, are we just heading toward a carnival of mirrors, a place where we just watch the pretty fires while the world burns around us?
A prototype for the future, or just a distraction from it. That is definitely something to chew on. Thanks for helping us unpack this massive cultural experiment.
Well, it was a pleasure to visit the dust.
And to you listening, thanks for taking the plunge with us. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.